When I look back at my journey, I realize that one of the most powerful decisions I ever made was to learn English. It wasn't easy. In fact, there were moments when I felt like giving up. I used to sit with books in front of me, frustrated that I couldn't understand a single sentence properly. People laughed at my mistakes, and sometimes I laughed at myself too. But deep down, I knew this language had the power to open doors I had never even imagined. I remember the days when I had no resources, no teachers, no guide to hold my hand. But I had one thing: belief. I believed that if I pushed myself every single day, even a little, I would improve. So I practiced. I spoke when no one was listening. I repeated words aloud even when they sounded broken. I listened to tapes, radio, and every little piece of English I could find. And slowly, I started to feel change within me. It wasn't just about learning a language. It was about building confidence. Each word I learned was like adding a brick to a strong foundation. Every time I spoke a sentence correctly, I felt stronger. And with every step forward, the world started to look different. Opportunities that once seemed far away started to come closer. Conversations that once scared me became exciting. Doors that I thought were locked forever began to open. The truth is, improving my English didn't just change the way I spoke, it changed the way I lived. It gave me courage to dream bigger, to connect with people I never thought I could reach, and to believe in myself even more. I realized that the real secret wasn't just about speaking fluently, it was about refusing to quit. If you feel like you're struggling today, I want you to remember this. Every mistake you make is a sign that you are trying, and every effort you give is an investment in your future. Don't compare yourself with anyone else. Don't worry if progress feels slow. Keep going. One day, you will look back and see how far you have come, and you will realize that the journey was worth it. Language has the power to transform your destiny, but only if you believe in yourself and keep moving forward. Your voice matters, your story matters, and the world is waiting to hear it. Belief in oneself is the foundation of any journey, especially when the path ahead feels uncertain and full of obstacles. When I first started learning English, I didn't have much around me to depend on. There were no professional teachers guiding me step by step, no fancy institutes to join, and no endless resources available at my fingertips the way people have now. All I had was a dream, a quiet whisper inside me that kept saying, "You can do this." That voice, that belief, became my foundation when everything else seemed impossible. Without it, I would have given up the very first time someone laughed at my broken sentences, or the first time I failed to understand even the simplest of words. Belief is like a seed planted deep in the heart. At first, it feels invisible, fragile, almost insignificant. But when you nurture it with effort, with patience, and with hope, it begins to grow stronger, and soon it becomes the very root that holds you steady when storms come. For me, belief was not just about thinking positively. It was about convincing myself every day that even though I was not good enough today, I would be better tomorrow. I had to look into the mirror and remind myself that failure was temporary, that embarrassment was temporary, but my determination could last forever if I chose to hold on to it. There were days when I questioned myself. I wondered why I should continue struggling with a language that seemed so complicated and distant from my reality. Many people around me didn't care about learning it, and some even mocked the idea of trying so hard. But belief does something powerful. It silences the noise of doubt from the outside world. It makes you focus on your inner vision rather than other people's opinions. When my belief was strong, I could walk past criticism without letting it break me. I could listen to people laughing at my mistakes and still keep practicing because I trusted that one day those mistakes would become my strength. Belief also gave me courage to take small steps that others hesitated to take. I remember standing in front of people, trembling with fear, yet forcing myself to say something in English. My voice shook, my pronunciation wasn't clear, and sometimes people didn't even understand what I was trying to say. But my belief told me, at least you tried, and tomorrow you will try again. Without that belief, I would have chosen silence, and silence would have stolen my progress. Every small attempt I made, no matter how weak or broken it was, became a part of my journey only because I believed it mattered. Another powerful thing about belief is that it keeps you moving when results are invisible. For months, I practiced without feeling any major improvement. It was frustrating, like walking through darkness without seeing light. But my belief reminded me that growth often happens quietly, underneath the surface, before it shows itself. Just like a seed underground, I trusted that my efforts were building something inside me, even if I couldn't yet see it. That trust kept me consistent. It taught me patience. And eventually, the results began to show. The sentences that once felt impossible to speak started to flow a little smoother. The words I once forgot began to stay in my memory, and every time that happened, I realized it was my belief that carried me through the times when giving up seemed easier than going on. Belief also changes the way you see yourself. Before I started, I thought I was just an ordinary person with no special talent. But when I believed I could learn English, it unlocked a new version of myself. Someone who could be brave, disciplined, and determined. I saw that my limits were not fixed. They were only illusions created by fear. Belief tore down those illusions and gave me the strength to rewrite my own identity. Instead of saying, I can't, I started to say, I can and I will. That shift was life-changing because once you begin to see yourself differently, the world begins to treat you differently too. It's important to understand that belief is not a magical solution. It doesn't remove the hard work, the struggles, or the failures. But what it does is give meaning to all of those struggles. Without belief, failure feels like the end. With belief, failure becomes a lesson. Without belief, mistakes feel humiliating. With belief, mistakes become stepping stones. This mindset allowed me to embrace the difficulties of learning instead of running away from them. Every time I doubted myself, belief whispered, keep going. Every time I wanted to quit, belief reminded me of the bigger picture. It was like a quiet but constant companion walking with me, reminding me that no matter how far the destination seemed, every step forward was progress. And slowly, with every passing day, that belief became unshakable. Consistency is the bridge that carries belief into reality. When I started my journey of improving English, I quickly realized that motivation alone wasn't enough. Some days I felt excited, full of energy, ready to learn new words and speak confidently. But then came the hard days, the days when I didn't feel like opening a book, the days when I was too tired, the days when progress felt invisible. In those moments, I learned the real secret: consistent practice. Not once a week, not once a month, but every single day, no matter how I felt, I had to show up for myself. At first, I made small commitments. I told myself that even if I couldn't study for hours, I would at least give 10 minutes daily. Sometimes it was repeating a few sentences aloud. Sometimes it was writing down a handful of words and using them in my own way. Other times it was listening to conversations in English, even if I only understood a little. What mattered was not how much I did, it was that I did something every single day. And slowly, like drops of water filling a jar, my efforts started to accumulate. Consistency turned practice into a habit. In the beginning, practice felt like a struggle, like dragging myself up a mountain. But after weeks of doing it daily, it became natural, almost automatic. I no longer needed to fight with myself to study. It became part of my routine, just like eating or sleeping. This habit saved me from the trap of excuses. Even on the worst days, when my mind whispered, "You don't have time today," or "You're too tired," my habit spoke louder, saying, "Just do a little, it still counts." And that little bit always made a difference. The beauty of consistent practice is that it compounds over time. One day of practice may feel small and unimportant, but 100 days of consistent practice transform you completely. I noticed this when I look back at myself after months of effort. I was no longer the same person who stumbled on every word. My sentences were smoother, my vocabulary wider, my confidence higher, and all of it was built not in one moment of brilliance, but in countless small, repeated actions that no one else saw. Consistency also taught me patience. There were many moments when I felt stuck, when I kept practicing but didn't see immediate results. In the past, I might have given up, thinking I wasn't capable. But daily practice reminded me that progress is often invisible before it becomes obvious. It's like going to the gym. You don't see results after 1 or 2 workouts, but after months of showing up, the transformation is undeniable. The same principle applied to my English. For weeks, it felt like nothing was changing. But then suddenly, one day, I realized I could hold a conversation I never thought possible. That breakthrough was the reward of consistency. Another important lesson was that consistent practice doesn't always have to be perfect. Many people wait for the perfect time, the perfect environment, the perfect teacher, but I couldn't afford to wait. I practiced with whatever I had. Sometimes I read old newspapers. Sometimes I watched a short video and repeated the sentences. Sometimes I spoke to myself in the mirror, pretending to have conversations. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep me moving forward. Consistency is not about perfection, it's about persistence. Through daily practice, I also discovered the power of repetition. The more I repeated words and sentences, the more they became a natural part of me. At first, I had to force myself to remember grammar rules or vocabulary, but after repeating them over and over, they became effortless, almost automatic. Just like a song you hear again and again stays in your memory, the same happens with language. Repetition, fueled by consistency, carved English into my mind in a way that no single lesson ever could. Consistency gave me confidence as well. Every day that I practiced, I built trust in myself. I proved to myself that I was serious, that I was committed. This self-trust is powerful because it makes you fearless. When I spoke in front of others, I wasn't as afraid of making mistakes anymore because deep down I knew I had practiced. Even if I failed, I could try again tomorrow. Consistency made me resilient, teaching me that one bad attempt doesn't define me. My daily effort does. Most importantly, consistent practice created momentum. At first, starting felt difficult, like pushing a heavy wheel, but once the wheel began to turn, it became easier to keep it moving. Each day built on the last, and the progress motivated me to continue. Momentum carried me through the tough days when motivation was low. It reminded me that I had already come too far to stop now. Looking back, I realized that consistency was the true turning point. Belief gave me the courage to start, but consistent practice gave me the strength to continue. It turned my dream into discipline, my hope into habit, and my small steps into a big transformation. Without consistency, belief would have remained just a wish, but with it, I began to see real, lasting change in myself. Mistakes are often seen as something to be ashamed of, something to avoid at all costs. But on my journey of improving English, I learned that mistakes were not my enemies. They were my teachers. In the beginning, every mistake felt like a failure. Whenever I mispronounced a word or used the wrong grammar, I felt a sting of embarrassment. People laughed, sometimes kindly and sometimes cruelly, and I wanted to hide. But over time, I realized that every mistake carried a lesson inside it, and if I was brave enough to face them instead of running away, they would guide me toward growth. There was a time when I avoided speaking English because I was terrified of making errors. I thought silence would protect me from judgment. But silence also stole my progress. I remember sitting in situations where I wanted to speak but held back because I was afraid of being wrong, and in those moments I remained the same, stuck in the same place. It was only when I began to allow myself to make mistakes, deliberately, openly, that I started to move forward. I realized that people might laugh for a moment, but the skill I was building would last for a lifetime. One of the most powerful lessons I learned is that mistakes are proof of effort. They show that you are trying, experimenting, stepping outside of your comfort zone. A person who never makes mistakes is a person who never tries. When I reframe mistakes in this way, they stopped being shameful and started becoming signs of progress. Every time I stumbled, I told myself, this is evidence that I am learning. Instead of feeling defeated, I began to feel proud of my attempts, even if they were imperfect. Another important truth is that mistakes highlight the gaps in your knowledge. When I made an error, it pointed directly to what I needed to improve. If I forgot a word, it showed me that my vocabulary in that area was weak. If I mispronounced something, it reminded me to pay attention to sounds. If I struggled with grammar, it revealed the exact structure I needed to practice more. In this way, mistakes became a personal guidebook. They showed me what to focus on, what to strengthen, and what to repeat until it became natural. There were times when I felt frustrated because I made the same mistakes again and again. But even in those moments, I reminded myself that repetition is part of learning. Just like a child falls many times before learning to walk, I too had to stumble repeatedly before mastering the skill. The key was to not see repeated mistakes as proof that I was incapable, but as proof that I was still in the process of learning. And eventually, with enough practice, the mistakes began to fade, replaced by confidence. Mistakes also taught me humility. They reminded me that learning is a journey, not a destination. No one begins as an expert. Everyone, no matter how skilled they are today, once stood where I was, unsure, nervous, making errors. This humbled me and allowed me to be kinder to myself. Instead of punishing myself for being imperfect, I learned to celebrate the courage it took to try. That shift in attitude freed me from fear and gave me the strength to keep moving forward. I also discovered that mistakes can build resilience. Every time I faced embarrassment and still continued, I grew stronger. At first, the sting of being corrected or laughed at felt unbearable. But after a while, it didn't bother me as much. I realized that mistakes didn't define my worth. They simply marked my progress. The more mistakes I made, the less fragile I became. I stopped being afraid of falling because I had fallen so many times and always managed to stand up again. That resilience spread beyond language learning and into other parts of my life, making me bolder in everything I did. Another surprising gift of mistakes was connection. When I made errors while speaking, sometimes people corrected me, sometimes they encouraged me, and sometimes they even shared their own struggles. These interactions built bridges. Instead of isolating me, mistakes gave me opportunities to connect with others. I realized that being vulnerable, showing my flaws, made me more relatable and human. People respected my effort even if my words were broken because they saw the determination behind them. Over time, I began to see mistakes not as obstacles, but as stepping stones. Each one carried me a little further on my path. Without them, I wouldn't have known what to improve, and I wouldn't have gained the confidence I have today. Mistakes shaped me, polished me, and taught me lessons that no book or classroom could teach. They became an essential part of my journey, not something separate from success, but something deeply tied to it. Looking back now, I can say that my biggest breakthroughs often came right after my biggest mistakes. It was the times I failed most miserably that I learned the most valuable lessons. The very moments that once embarrassed me became the memories I cherish because they remind me how far I have come. Mistakes turned out to be not a sign of weakness, but a sign of courage. The courage to try, to learn, and to grow. When I first began learning English, I thought the goal was only about communication, about understanding words and constructing sentences. But what I discovered along the way was far more powerful. Learning the language slowly began to build my confidence in a way I had never experienced before. At the start, I was shy, hesitant, and full of self-doubt. Speaking even a single sentence in front of others felt like standing on a stage with bright lights shining down, exposing all my flaws. My hands would sweat, my heart would race, and my voice would tremble. But as I practiced and kept moving forward, English started giving me something deeper than vocabulary. It gave me the courage to believe in myself. Every new word I learned felt like a small victory. It was more than just a word. It was proof that I was growing, proof that my efforts were working. I remember the first time I managed to hold a short conversation without stopping or searching for words. The joy I felt was not just about speaking, it was about proving to myself that I was capable. That moment became fuel for my confidence. And the best part was, the more I learned, the more these moments multiplied. Slowly, I began to stand taller, speak louder, and feel stronger. What surprised me most was how this confidence didn't just stay limited to English. It began to affect every part of my life. The person who once avoided speaking in groups began to raise his voice. The person who once felt invisible started to participate. With every improvement in English, I began to feel like I was breaking invisible chains that had held me back for years. Confidence is contagious. Once it starts in one area of your life, it spreads into others. English became the doorway through which I discovered a more courageous version of myself. One of the biggest shifts happened when I started to realize that confidence was not about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to try. In the beginning, I thought I needed to speak flawless English before I could feel confident, but I was wrong. Confidence came not from perfection, but from progress. Each attempt, no matter how imperfect, built my self-belief. When I stumbled and still kept going, I felt stronger. When I made mistakes and didn't quit, I felt braver. Confidence, I realized, grows not when you avoid mistakes, but when you face them without fear. There were many moments when people corrected me, sometimes kindly, sometimes with a laugh. Instead of letting those moments crush me, I used them to build myself. Each correction became an opportunity to improve, and each time I survived the embarrassment, I realized that I was tougher than I thought. This resilience became a foundation of my confidence. I no longer feared being wrong because I understood that being wrong was part of becoming right. That freedom, the freedom to speak without fear, was one of the greatest gifts English gave me. Another way English built my confidence was by expanding my world. The more I learned, the more I could connect with people I had never been able to talk to before. I could understand songs, movies, books, and conversations that once felt like locked doors. Suddenly, I wasn't standing outside anymore. I was part of something bigger. That sense of belonging gave me pride and strength. It felt like stepping into a new world where my voice mattered. And once you feel your voice matters, your confidence begins to rise naturally. There was also something powerful about being able to express myself clearly. Before, I often stayed silent because I didn't know how to put my thoughts into words. I felt trapped, as if my mind was full of ideas, but my tongue couldn't release them. Learning English slowly unlocked that cage. I began to share my opinions, my dreams, my questions. The more I expressed myself, the more I discovered that my thoughts had value. People listened, they responded, and that gave me even more confidence to speak again. It became a cycle. Expression built confidence, and confidence encouraged more expression. Confidence also grew through small daily victories. Even something as simple as understanding a phrase in a movie or writing a short paragraph without mistakes felt empowering. These tiny achievements added up day by day until they formed a strong foundation of self-belief. Confidence, I realized, isn't something that appears suddenly. It's built brick by brick through small acts of courage. Every time I chose to speak instead of staying silent, every time I practiced instead of quitting, I laid another brick. Over time, those bricks built a wall of confidence that no criticism could easily break. Most importantly, learning English taught me that confidence is not about what others think. It's about what you believe about yourself. People will always have opinions. Some will encourage you, others will doubt you. But true confidence is built when you stop depending on their approval and start trusting your own journey. For me, every step in English became proof that I was capable of more than I imagined. That inner belief became unshakable, and no external voice could take it away. Today, when I look back at the shy, hesitant version of myself, I realize that learning English didn't just give me a new language. It gave me a new identity. It transformed the way I saw myself and the way I carried myself. And while fluency was the goal at first, the real reward turned out to be confidence, because with confidence you can face anything, not just a language. Opportunities have a way of hiding behind effort. They don't come knocking on the door of those who sit still. They reveal themselves to those who keep moving, even when the path is unclear. When I started my journey of learning English, I didn't realize how many doors this effort would unlock for me. At first, all I wanted was to understand and speak better, but what I gained was much bigger. I discovered that every ounce of effort I put in created opportunities I never thought I would have. In the beginning, life felt limited. My world was small, and opportunities seemed far away, almost unreachable. I would look at successful people speaking confidently, connecting with others, traveling, and creating change, and I felt as if that kind of life was reserved only for them. But when I put effort into learning English, little by little, I saw that the same opportunities were not locked away from me. They were simply waiting for me to prepare myself. The harder I worked, the closer they came. One of the first changes I noticed was in communication. Suddenly, I could connect with people I once avoided because of the language barrier. I could ask questions, share ideas, and join conversations that once made me feel like an outsider. With every conversation, new possibilities opened. Sometimes it was as simple as gaining a new friend, and other times it was the chance to learn something valuable. Opportunities don't always arrive in the form of big events. Often they come quietly, disguised as everyday interactions, and without the effort of learning English, I would have missed those moments completely. Another way effort created opportunities was in education. Before, I felt limited to the resources around me. But once I improved my English, I discovered an entire world of books, videos, courses, and knowledge that had been inaccessible to me. It was like finding a library with doors that only opened once you had the key. That key was my effort. The more I invested in learning, the more I gained access to ideas and knowledge that expanded my thinking and gave me an advantage I never imagined. Each new piece of knowledge became a stepping stone to bigger opportunities in life. Effort also changed how people saw me. When others noticed my determination to improve, they began to respect me differently. People are drawn to those who strive, to those who put in the work to better themselves. I was no longer just someone struggling with language. I became someone who was growing, someone who was serious about self-improvement. That respect itself created opportunities. Teachers wanted to help me, friends encouraged me, and even strangers admired the persistence I showed. Doors began to open, not because I was perfect, but because my effort was visible. Opportunities also appeared in unexpected ways. For example, there were times when I was asked to help others because of the progress I had made. Sharing what I had learned not only gave me confidence, but it also built networks, relationships, and chances to grow further. It taught me that effort doesn't just benefit me, it inspires others and creates circles of opportunity that go beyond what we imagine. Sometimes, the very act of trying becomes an invitation for life to reward you. I also realize that effort attracts opportunities because it prepares you to recognize them. Before, I might have ignored or missed a chance simply because I wasn't ready. But when I had put in the effort to improve my English, I could see opportunities where I once saw obstacles. A conversation that once felt scary became a chance to connect. A book that once felt impossible to read became a source of wisdom. A job interview that once felt intimidating became a platform to prove myself. The opportunities were always there, but only effort gave me the eyes to see them and the strength to seize them. There were still many challenges, of course. Effort doesn't guarantee that everything will be easy, but it guarantees that you will be stronger when opportunities do arrive. I had to face rejection, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But every time I chose to keep putting in the effort, I became more prepared for the next chance. When an opportunity slipped away, I didn't see it as the end. I saw it as preparation for the next one that was coming. And true enough, with patience and persistence, the right ones began to appear. Looking back, I realized that effort and opportunity are partners. One cannot exist without the other. Opportunities without effort are wasted, and effort without opportunity feels empty. But when you keep pushing, when you give your best consistently, effort eventually attracts the right opportunities into your life. It may not happen overnight, but it happens in ways that surprise you, often at the moment you least expect. Every step I took in learning English proved this truth. The more I invested in myself, the more the world responded with open doors. It wasn't luck, it wasn't magic, it was the result of effort, building the path for opportunities to reach me. And the more I experienced this, the more I understood that effort is never wasted. Even when results are not immediate, effort is silently preparing you for the chances that will shape your future. Persistence is what turns an ordinary journey into an extraordinary transformation. When I look back at my struggle with learning English, I realize it wasn't talent, intelligence, or even resources that made the biggest difference. It was persistence. The simple decision to keep going, even when everything felt impossible, became the force that reshaped my entire life. Without persistence, belief would have faded, practice would have stopped, mistakes would have broken me, confidence would have crumbled, and opportunities would have passed me by. But with persistence, all of those pieces came together to change my destiny. There were countless times when quitting seemed like the easier choice. I remember sitting alone with my notebook, staring at words that made no sense, repeating sentences that sounded awkward, and feeling as if I was walking in circles. The progress was slow, painfully slow, and doubt crept into my mind. I thought, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I'm not capable. Those thoughts were heavy, and they could have ended my journey right there. But persistence whispered differently. Persistence said, "It's okay if today feels hard, tomorrow you will try again." That quiet voice of persistence became my anchor when motivation disappeared. Persistence taught me that success is not about speed, but about endurance. Some people learn quickly, others slowly, but the ones who never stop are the ones who eventually arrive. I was not the fastest learner, and I didn't always get things right the first time, but I chose to persist. I chose to show up day after day, even when I was tired, even when I was discouraged. Over time, those days of persistence began to add up, and what once felt impossible started to become natural. It wasn't a sudden change, it was a slow transformation built brick by brick through relentless effort. There were also moments when persistence required me to face repeated failures. I remember speaking in English, making mistake after mistake, and feeling embarrassed. I remember writing sentences and realizing later that they were completely wrong. Failure felt like a constant companion, but persistence gave me a new perspective. Instead of seeing failure as the end, I began to see it as part of the process. Persistence reminded me that every failure was temporary, but giving up would make it permanent, and so I carried on, even when success felt far away. Persistence also gave me resilience. Each time I pushed through difficulties, I became stronger. At first, small setbacks would discourage me deeply, but as I practiced persistence, I learned how to bounce back faster. If one day was unproductive, I promised myself the next day would be better. If one attempt failed, I reminded myself that the next attempt might succeed. This resilience became my shield against disappointment, allowing me to move forward without losing hope. Another important truth persistence taught me was discipline. It is easy to work hard when you feel inspired, but persistence requires working hard even when you don't. There were many mornings when I didn't feel like practicing, when distractions pulled me away, when life's challenges demanded my attention. But persistence trained me to return to my goal no matter what. Discipline became the habit that carried me through days when motivation was absent. And in the long run, discipline mattered more than bursts of inspiration. Persistence also reshaped my self-identity. I began to see myself not as someone who gave up easily, but as someone who endured, someone who kept going, no matter how tough things became. That shift in identity gave me confidence, not just in language learning, but in life itself. If I could persist through the challenges of English, I could persist through anything. That belief made me braver, stronger, and more determined in every other challenge I faced. There were times when progress felt invisible, and those were the hardest moments to persist through. When you don't see results, persistence feels meaningless. But I discovered that persistence is like planting seeds. For a long time, nothing seems to happen. You water the soil, you take care of it, and still, the surface looks empty. But beneath the soil, growth is happening quietly. And then one day, without warning, the first green shoots appear. That's exactly how my persistence with English felt. For months, I saw little change, but deep inside, my mind was adapting, absorbing, preparing. Then suddenly, I realized I could understand conversations, form sentences, and express myself in ways I couldn't before. It felt like magic, but it was persistence that created that moment. Persistence also taught me patience. In a world where we want quick results, persistence forces us to slow down and trust the process. I learned that great things take time and that real growth cannot be rushed. This patience became one of the most valuable lessons of my journey. It reminded me that destiny is not shaped in a single day, but in the daily choices to keep moving, keep trying, and keep believing. And slowly, I realized that persistence was not just about learning English. It was about rewriting my life story. The person who once hesitated, doubted, and feared became someone who endured, overcame, and believed. Persistence didn't just help me achieve a goal. It transformed who I was at the core. It became the reason why I could dream bigger, aim higher, and step into a future that once seemed out of reach. And now, as I stand at the end of this journey, I can say with certainty that learning English was never just about words or grammar. It was about transformation. It was about believing in myself when no one else did, showing up with consistency when results felt invisible, embracing mistakes as my greatest teachers, building confidence one small step at a time, discovering opportunities that effort alone could unlock, and persisting through every setback until I found myself stronger than I ever imagined. This journey taught me that change is not reserved for a chosen few. It is possible for anyone who is willing to start, to stumble, to rise again, and to never stop moving forward. The language I once feared became the tool that rewrote my destiny, but more importantly, the process itself shaped me into someone I never thought I could become. And if there is one truth I carry with me, it is this: your life can change the moment you decide to believe, to act, and to keep going no matter how hard it gets. Because persistence, fueled by belief and effort, has the power to turn even the smallest step into a path that leads to a completely new life.